what are we doing here? This is the future of film marketing. Obviously, film distribution landscape has changed seismically in the last couple of months. Cinemas are closed, and whilst everyone hopes that changes quickly and cinemas are reopened, there's now obviously opportunities in the digital space, and that's something we want to look at closely. Now, what are the opportunities now for releasing films to audiences, and what's the film marketing going to look like in the future? And that's the other part of the focus of these sessions, is taking a step back, if you like, and thinking ahead. I'm a firm believer that we're not here to predict. We're not here to predict the future, because everyone on this call, all of you dialing in, are on the field of play, if you like. We're not sitting on the sidelines. This is our industry, and the opportunity now is to create what the future of film marketing might look like. So that's our big picture thinking, and we'll be picking this up throughout the 4 sessions, coming back to what this might look like. And part of that is bringing in ideas from other industries, and that's, I think that's an important thing that we want to try to bring in expertise from beyond film. So today is all about launching films online, and how we can do that more effectively. What are the opportunities now, and how can we maximize those as rights holders, as distributors? Question there, Justine. This will be available to stream afterwards. Let me first introduce our esteemed panel today. So firstly, we have Wendy Bernfeld. Hi, Wendy. Wendy's currently based in Amsterdam. She's has a auspicious career in film. Let me unmute you there. Wendy's had an auspicious career in film.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, including CEO of Canal Plus, and now she heads up The Right Stuff, which is a consultancy, an agency which looks at the VOD space. Wendy has been called, I'm told, a digital rights guru. So Wendy's going to be talking about some of those trends. Also on the panel today, we have Kieran O'Herlihy. I butchered his name there. I'm so sorry, Kieran. I need to improve my Irish pronunciations. But Kieran is a digital strategist. He is also manages a team at Google in Google partnerships, and he's had a lot of experience launching digital products. So we'll be very interested to hear from Kieran about how we might learn from some of his experience in Google and in gaming, we can bring across the film. And then last but not least is Catherine Downs, who is co-founder and CMO of usheru, the film data analytics and marketing company that I also work for. So I'd like to start really by going back to Wendy. And Wendy, we all know the landscape's changed. We all know, the situation with Corona in our individual countries. But what's happening out there in the digital space for films? What's happening with VOD? I mean, it must be. Everyone says it's going up, right? But what are the specific kind of trends we're seeing right now?
Thanks, everyone. If I had to pick four, four things have been subsuming all at the same time in the past maybe 2 months at most. With the new films, which is more your topic, launching new films online, we have a crossover of festivals, either canceling or going online. So let's call them virtual festivals. And they're in different shapes. Some of them are nonprofit, some of them are commercial. We have virtual cinema, which is releasing in partnership with art house cinemas that are empty and sharing revenues with them. And that's usually done by sales agents who have the rights to release a film at a festival, and then the festival was canceled. We have the premium VOD drama that you've seen in the press, for example, Universal and AMC Studios over Trolls. But for me, it's much more interesting in the indie sector, Indian documentary side. And that's where you're going straight to streaming, but for a premium retail price accompanied with a great deal of marketing. And the fourth trend is that we shouldn't forget the regular normal VOD world, pay-per-view, pay-per-month, and AdVOD, TVOD, SVOD, and AdVOD. And before Corona kicked in, we'd already had a crazy explosion, first from the multitude of new big players who came in right before and who are spreading to Europe this year, such as obviously HBO Max and Apple TV and Disney Plus, but even NBC's Peacock, Viacom, the Tubi TV, Roku, they were there, and there was already a huge demand before Corona coming from competitors to the big five, telecom, cable companies, services who were not competing but trying to complement with niches such as art house, documentary, horror. We had regional services coming across, and even the OTT boxes and connected TVs. And finally, right before Corona, the larger players like Netflix and Amazon were focused mainly on the originals, if you like, and often series. But with the advent of Corona, the two things that changed are obviously a move back to library and classics, which you've seen recently, for example, with Netflix, and a great hunger to buy more of what's already produced, whether it's current or library. The sweet spot for SVOD is 2 to 6 years old, and titles older than that often find a home in AdVOD. Most of the time, if you're not dealing with the big five, they'll deal non-exclusively, so you can have multiple deals across multiple regions and platforms. And interestingly, for this topic will be, how do you package that stuff and make this sale? In a way, it's a form of launching online, but you're relaunching your library that's been forgotten about or pushed aside before in a curated way. But if we go back to the most recent, the new trends, the virtual festivals, at first Copenhagen Docs and Vilnius, of course, went online in a miraculous 5 or 6 day period. And then there were some others, South by Southwest with Amazon, or this recent YouTube Multifest initiative coming up. But if you're looking more commercially at a sustainable model, some of the other festivals that are not yet live but coming would be, for example, New Zealand International Film Festival, who is a few months away, as with Sydney and others. And there, we've been working with them to negotiate back, and so the interest of all the stakeholders are balanced. Kind of limited streaming rights, geo-blocked, creative pricing, business to business and business to consumer. So I think looking at the festivals is one approach. The virtual cinema is just partnering, like Kino Marquee in the US, or in the UK you have a Modern Film, Eve, who's launched with art house cinemas, and they share the percent of the VODs online. Universiné in Belgium is doing a similar thing. And in the premium VOD space, if we ignored the big blockbusters like Trolls and looked at indies, in practical terms, a hybrid model is making sense where theaters can shorten their window and take a percent of the VOD revenues in exchange for not having theatrical as long a period. So we're seeing a lot of experimentation, and it's all in the past few months. I think I would encourage us to look at the difference between just throwing films online in an online fest that's free, if it has a certain goal like YouTube, where the proceeds go to charity, and it's mainly library titles because that's what it is, from all the festivals. That's one approach. But library titles also will have a commercial value in regular AdVOD or SVOD with some of these other platforms. So one has to balance those needs and commercial potential, particularly if you step outside of the US and UK to the rest of Europe, Middle East, Africa, all the other buyers and sometimes funders. And in the premium VOD space, certainly like with Focus Features and Never, Rarely, Sometimes, or later this month, you'll see The High Note coming out. It can be a whole new forum for indies beyond theatrical or in a hybrid approach. Coming up shortly in May is pure PVOD. And what it's going to need is strong marketing, because you can't rely on the festival or the theatrical prior window. And I know it's on to your topic. Is that a good overview for now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great overview. Thank you, Wendy.
My internet connection is unstable.
Well, I think we got the key points there, and it's it's clearly there are everyone's sort of scrambling to adjust in one sense. You know, you've had amazing turnarounds in the festival space, and the innovation of virtual cinema, and how we can still, distributors can still work with the cinema brands to push films out there. I guess the premium VOD one. I mean, we're not here to talk about the W word at all. Windows. This is, but the idea of launching a film, online, and I guess the thing which I'm really interested in is that like a really different process to launching it in cinemas, and maybe we can come to that. But Catherine, did you want to now? I know you had some sort of.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Alex? Okay, I'm just going to actually.
Can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask you a question, Wendy, based on what you're saying. I'm curious, and I think it's probably something I'd like to touch on. Are you seeing decision-making happen with, say, former clients previously that weren't sure about which direction to go? Do you think decision-making is happening much more quickly around VOD and choices that rights holders are making? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding that it's day and night, round the clock in my sector right now. Everybody has a sense of urgency to make decisions immediately. For example, if they have the opportunity to participate in the YouTube festival, but they also want to explore, hey, wait a minute, can I sell these for flat fees somewhere else to Africa or China, and can I do both? And so it's very intense in the licensing space, but also in terms of releasing online. The key is not to just throw it online for a big license fee and then get buried in a queue that a consumer doesn't find, particularly and that's really specific, I feel, to the film. If it's a documentary filmmaker with a mission, you know, he may care less about the amount of money and more about reaching more homes and having maximum, whereas others are looking for bang for the buck as soon as possible to make up for losses. So it's very film genre and window specific, but I have noticed that it's really a frenzy, because the festivals between February and July are all in these decision-making periods, whether for films they were planning to show or whether they will be curating little packages to license to other buyers, charitable or not. And so that's massive. And for rights holders, they're struggling as old definitions don't fit. You know, festivals aren't really theatrical. You don't need full online rights. You only need limited streaming for a couple of days in a region. So everybody's trying to adapt their traditional models quickly overnight in this changing landscape.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reason I'm asking you that as well is because I think at usheru we're seeing something very similar in terms of decision making is happening a lot more quickly. You know, I think what has happened in this period is there was a situation looming, and we've started calling it stream and screen, right? So it is like a strategy before, which was very sequential, screen and then stream, you know, and it was plugged on, maybe stream was plugged on to the end of the film's life cycle. Has the kind of like way to think of it has changed, and potentially what will happen in the future is people will always consider, or certainly for the next 10 years, the backup required in such situations as this, you know, to think about streaming more central and home entertainment as more central to the overall film strategy from the beginning. So I'll just speak a little bit about what we're seeing actually at usheru. I think the main thing we're seeing is, because we give a product that shows theatrical and streaming home entertainment in one technical product, and it's, I guess, a destination for marketing, where a consumer can see both theatrical and streaming availability of a movie. We're actually seeing that this kind of this move towards, you know, making streaming and home entertainment more central is just fast forwarded. We're seeing most distributors that we work with, both old and new, you know, rushing to monetize their catalog. So there's one piece, I guess, which is like you're describing, is getting your movie into a platform, getting your deal, depending on which is the right platform for whatever audience you're trying to seek. But then another piece is getting consumers to know that it's there, right? And that's, I guess, is really where the marketing comes. So probably the place where we work, or where I work as usheru, is in that part, and we're trying to give the distributors are looking for, trying to go, oh, I need one destination where consumer can go see all my catalog, and I want to foster a direct relationship with them. I think the thing we're also seeing is there's been a strong shift towards becoming direct consumer by distributors, and this has fast forwards this a bit too. And what we're seeing as well is once distributors have a place to send all those people to, because they can't keep spending money to send everyone to Amazon and send them to Netflix and send them there, because, you know, like you've described, Wendy, somebody might be on 10 to 12 platforms across their catalog. They don't want to spend a lot of money sending people to every single one of those platforms. That's an expensive undertaking. So they want to send them to one place. So I think we're giving them a quick solution and an ability to do that with one of our products. And then really that marketing piece, which I think you were referring to there, Alex, is how do you effectively and cost effectively market to those people? Again, look, digital has become a very strong player, a very strong marketing channel in the marketing mix that we talk about, which is, you know, the offline marketing, which is, you know, the billboards and TV, the online piece, which is becoming more strong, and a larger share of budget over the last 5 years has now become all budget, you know. And like you mentioned, Wendy, is how do people do that effectively? Look, I think, well, we're advocates of you know, the use of data and really understanding what you're getting for the money that you spend online. Actually, I'd love to bring Kieran in here, because I always remember this from when I was first in Google. And when I joined, it was 2007, 2008, and the recession happened the last time. And the first thing that gets cut in a lot of companies is marketing budgets, right? It's the first thing to go. And that's because it's seen as a nice to have if you really have to cut the budgets down. Google did a really clever thing at the time. It was probably the making of their growth. Was they had a big campaign which called Speed Up and a Slowdown. At that point, people were still spending a lot of money on billboard, TV advertising, and not just, I'm not talking about film, I'm talking about every type of advertising. And then they really used that time opportunistically to get people to spend a lot more money on digital. And they called the whole campaign Speed Up in a Slowdown. And that really what moved people into that. And the reason it was attractive was because, okay, if I have 10,000 to spend on marketing, I want to know how that's landing. I could hand this to spend that on a TV ad for a short slot, but I won't really know if that worked for me. And that is, I think, why digital marketing and data, and because look, I think from an e-commerce perspective, this opportunity right now is giving everyone a great chance to test what works, to build insight, experience, and everybody seems much more open to trying new digital platforms. And I know there's new platforms, and maybe Kieran could talk about that a little bit more. There's new digital platforms and social media platforms launching all the time. And some are on trend, some can be really effective for acquiring new audiences, and some can get you a lot of what I call vanity metrics, which is likes, but may not result in people actually watching things. And I think that I think one piece we would advocate in terms of choosing with your digital marketing, you can choose to spend the money on what is called like PPC, so pay-per-click advertising, which is pieces like Facebook advertising and Google, or any display advertising on the internet where someone basically, once they click, someone pays. Between that and like other kind of social advertising that's happening in the different platforms. I think what you need to do ultimately is to say, well, what am I trying to achieve every time I spend a penny on this? Do I want to look at branding for my label? Do I want to look branding just for this film? And that, you know, maybe that's not resulting in the click. Do I want to look at customer acquisition, which is another type of marketing? And that's really conversion focused. It's like, I'm spending this money and I want 200 people to then watch the trailer. I want 1,000 people to watch the movie on this platform. And so there's basically different strands of marketing, which is you've branding, which is just, you know, the kind of high scale, let people know that it's there. Customer acquisition, which is really the conversion focused spend that you'll do online, and then retention. So it's well known that it costs you a lot more to acquire a customer online. Imagine I spend like €1.50 for every customer that will watch my trailer. And then I don't want to go and spend another €1.50 on that particular customer. I want that customer to be a fan of me. I want to try and engage them in the customer journey with my label, with my movie in some way, and be able to go back to that customer the next time at a lower cost. So maybe it costs me 30 cents the next time to go back to that customer. So I think these can be like, these are workshops in and of themselves to understand how to think differently about your branding of your product, your label, your company, versus your acquisition of an actual customer. It's going to do an action that you want versus retaining that customer. And that's really about building fans of your film franchise, your genre, becoming fan of a filmmaker. And I think people need to look at each of those things separately. And every time they test online, they need to maybe think, okay, well, my strategy for this particular campaign that I'm doing is this, and I'm going to keep a track of it. I'm going to measure all the data, and I'm going to go back. And when something's working, I'm going to take money away from something that's not working, and I'm going to double down on the one that's working. So I think that's probably the way for everyone to think about digital marketing. It's an experimentation, because your audience is your audience. You need to find them. you have certain ideas about who they are, but then you need to test things to confirm your ideas. And once you find it, then you double down your budget or your money on the one that looks like it's working the best. I don't know if you agree, Kieran.
Yeah, Kieran, I'd love to pick up on what Catherine said there about some of those digital techniques, but how do they apply when you're specifically looking at launching a digital product? Because cinemas were amazing launch pads for films, and the fact that they were there for a limited time was not always very helpful, but it was a great call to action, right? Because people knew they only had a short window. So yeah, how do you get people excited about a digital launch when you literally, it's there for forever, I guess.
Okay. First of all, thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. And Alex, you nailed my name. First time off, you nailed it. It's a very difficult Irish name, but you nailed it. So I guess maybe to go back firstly to we've kind of seen this before. At least myself and Katz were around Google around the same time, from things going great to things going terribly. I was learning my trade at that point, and I was lucky enough to be working a lot with the gaming industry. So I'm certainly an outsider to film. But what was very interesting is the direction we were getting within Google at that time was, okay, if companies don't know how to measure the marketing, they need to be careful, because obviously you can burn through cash. So we were really honing in on analytical skills around that time, and we were encouraging the different partners we worked with to become more analytical. And I don't think it's any surprise now that the gaming industry is around 77 billion a year, because at that time they were a great example of an industry that was deeply analytical. The guys who were making waves around that time, RuneScape, who were Jagex, who were a British company, all of those guys were deeply analytical. So that question of, do we turn off marketing? They knew how much marketing was worth to them for the various different projects they were working on. So the decision to turn off marketing was a much harder decision. Whereas I think in many different sectors, outside of film, for example, the wise decision is to turn off marketing if you don't know what you get from it. So I guess just from a kind of context perspective, I think one of the major pillars of the gaming industry has been how analytical they have become. 10, 12 years ago, console gaming, AAA quality games, that was the gaming industry. Since then, mobile gaming has come from nowhere to be more than 50% or nearly 50% of the entire industry, which is a very big number. And they've had to learn those skills. I've been lucky enough to have exposure to some of the studios who have had that journey. There's a great little studio in London called Nitrum, and they've pivoted from being a Flash game portal to being a mobile app developer to releasing on Steam. So the foundations in which they launch are always changing. The platforms are changing, the technologies are changing, the audiences are changing. They're changing as a business. Their values are the same and have been constant throughout. And they've learned new skills, and they've survived. And I think that's been one defining feature of, marketing throughout that period of change, is acquiring new skills, having an open mind, and just constantly kind of reflecting where you are and moving on. To come back to your question. Sorry.
I have a quick question for you about that company. So why were they changing? Were they changing because the industry was changing, or consumers were consuming somewhere else, or what was happening?
Yeah, to speak of Nitrum, and I know them very well, Matt Annell, the CEO, is one of the sharpest individuals I've ever come across. Matt had experienced having to lay people off in his game studio. So it was himself and his brother set up the studio originally. So he felt that pain, and he didn't want to feel that pain again. And that was prior, obviously, to maybe 2008. Even in the good times, he had to lay people off, unfortunately. So when the mobile ecosystem was starting to heat up, they were making very good money from browser gaming, but they knew that they had to dip their toe in there and understand what was going on. So they originally partnered with the company Rovio of Angry Birds fame in Finland initially. They did so to diversify, because they knew things could change very quickly for them. They had felt that. From there out, it was to generate new revenue streams. It was to always have innovation at the heart of what they were doing. They didn't want to rest on their laurels. They didn't want to be caught, they didn't want to be caught off guard again. They didn't want to be in a position where they'd overstaffed and had to let people go or anything like that. So I think it was out of necessity, Catherine, is why they were trying new platforms. And it's because of that necessity, I think it's kept them sharp over the years. And now, even in 2020, in the midst of a crisis, they're launching on a new platform, Steam, which is a PC gaming platform.
Kieran, thanks so much for that. We're getting a bit of rustling sound from your feed. It could be the beard.
So luckily,
it could be the beard.
It may not look like it, but this beard has been trimmed, so I'll try and hold it out a little bit.
Mine too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So thinking about how people pivot in terms of the changing landscape, and yeah, what about like creating like this call to action? Is that something you can kind of summarize? Are there some key ideas there or lessons that we might better take across from gaming to film?
I think similar to the film industry, obviously there's a whole lot of risk with everything you produce, whether it's going to meet the audience that you intended to meet, if it's going to meet the goals, and they may be financial goals or they may be other goals. But for the most part, there's a lot of money goes into developing games, as I'm sure that does with film. So to that end, there's a lot of mitigation that needs to happen. The studios have kind of moved from a world where consumers were just consuming the content to being active participants now. And I might give a few examples of that. One of the biggest franchises out there is League of Legends, which is from a company called WIih Games. It's a global phenomenon at this point. They fill arenas to watch tournaments and so on. Early on, they had a lot of hardship around managing their IP and infringements on their IP. So they had a decision to make in terms of staffing that, as they were trying to develop the game and move into new territories and acquire more users and so on. They understood that there was quite a burden of resources on managing the IP side of their business. So they took quite a progressive view and decided that, okay, what kind of infringements are we seeing? Is it coming from within the community? And they turned things completely upside down, and they started facilitating the community to use their IP, to fan art, create wikis. And that ended up being quite a significant pillar of their success, because they had one of the more loyal audiences out there, an audience that would fight for them, and an audience that really felt that WIih Games was aligned with their goals as well. So I think that was really, they were one of the very good examples of engaging with your audience, turn them into participants, activating them as fans who you go out and win business for you. I could talk to you long and hard about, spending money to make money in terms of paid advertising, but I think those kind of more meta strategies are super, super important, and they complement spend money at the end of the day. If you can facilitate that kind of a community around the launch, so engaging with people early, during, and after, I think that makes every other bit of your marketing all that more powerful.
Kieran, I've actually some thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. We talk, myself and my business partner, Ollie, is the CEO of usheru. We often talk about how to help a film distributor, which is essentially like the gaming studio, how to help them build their own audience of fans. So I'm curious, in gaming, are people typically being, are they a fan of the studio's work? And is that something that you see really strong, or are they a fan of the game? And because, I think some studio, like we see in film, I think some distributors can create fans of their catalog and fans of everything they bring out. The way a writer, you look at a writer and go, I like everything they do, or the choices they make, or the genres that they produce and release, or is it more game focused, or maybe both? I actually don't know the answer to this question. I'd love to know what happens there.
I'm going to take a stab. I don't know if I know the answer completely, but I'll take a stab at it. For sure, there are celebrities in the space, and there's, that attract their own fandom. So for example, Galway natives, the Romeros, are gods in the world of gaming. They originally produced Doom, which is one of the most classic IPs. So you've got people like that who are out there, and whatever they touch, they're going to have droves of people coming after them, right? But you also have people creating a brand new IP that just works. And this is something that I've really found very interesting over the years, is the relationship between publishers and game studios and how that's changed. Because certainly when I started out in Google, publishers were almost seen as a threat to the individual game studios. And when mobile came along, many gaming studios thought, okay, we can bypass publishing. We don't need them. We don't need their skills. And what's been very interesting over the last couple of years is to see how the relationship between studios and publishing companies has improved. And how that works is you can build brand new IP, brand new game. These publishers often help you get it to the right audience, right? Because I've seen examples in the past where studios believed they had a great game. All the professionals were telling them they had a great game, but they couldn't match make that game with the right audience. So therefore, depending on their goals, typically financial, the IP failed. Whereas what's happening now, which is really, really interesting, is some of the big studios, you may have heard of a company called Voodoo, or huge publisher in the gaming world. Part of what Voodoo do is they really partner with the game studio to train them on the data side of things, to help them actually get samples of data to modify their proposition as they go. So I think there's a combination of, obviously, the celebrities in the space who can bring their own users, but for the most part, a lot of these games are reaching audiences for the very first time. Brands are being built, of course, and loyalty is coming with it, like Riot Games example. And for many of the studios, it's it's very it's starting vanilla.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really interesting, because I don't know if Wendy and Alex are drawing the same conclusions, like the parallels to, you're talking about the publishers there is, I suppose, a bit of an intermediary between the producers of the game and the consumers of it. Is like in the world of film, that's the cinemas maybe finding those initial audiences, and that the role that it plays is like, you can go direct, or you have you should have a good relationship with this essential it is a distributor, the actual.
I think it's a distributor, isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
It's the people who are marketing, who have that data coming back from audiences, and that would be that. Yeah. What, Wendy, go on. What do you think?
Maybe I have a different black sheep spin here, being digital, but I think sometimes the traditional forms of marketing, the push advertising and push marketing, is wildly inappropriate in feature film for sex. And I've noticed even studios with massive budgets, will still invade your social media with "watch my trailer, see my film now, on tonight at 9." And it's a complete turnoff, I think, at least in the VOD space. What I have found works, for what it's worth, is also quite inexpensive. It's more organic social media marketing, where you're barely, if ever, mentioning until later the name of the film even, or the name of the studio at all. And you begin with a thematic thing. If it's vampire movies, you post interesting articles or excerpts from vampire theme all over the world. You build kind of a following, and then at some point you lead them to the fact that you have this trailer or film. And I think that's far more engaging and also not expensive, except in time. But you really reach out to the fans of the topic before they've heard the name of your film, before they've heard the name of your indie studio. And often, in VOD, telecom or cable companies aren't always great marketers. Distributors aren't always great marketers. Producers can be. They can speak to their fans and their audiences, or create them, but often don't think it's their role. But I mean, I just can't stress enough this kind of hybrid approach where, there's a digital angle, a traditional angle, there's reps that are good in both, and bringing them together gives you the most audience and the most bang for your buck. Yeah. And I certainly DIY, the way you've described in gaming, DIY and freemium approaches, where something is free and then you pay for the next level up. To me, that works very well, transcending from gaming to film and to VOD platforms.
Yeah. Actually, can I ask you, Kieran, you're like the, what's the word? We're just picking your brain here completely. Imagine I have a game, right? And I'm publishing it into now the world of online gaming, and it's you know, very saturated. And this, I'm trying to see, like, okay, if I've got a film and I'm trying to put it out into the world of VOD, which, you know, there's a lot of content. What have you seen work for a gaming publisher or a studio, like, to just, apart from just cold hard cash? Imagine I'm a small producer, I put a game out, how am I getting noticed? What do I do?
Yeah, so I've seen this is particularly for smaller studios at the moment. I'm just trying to, you know, amass a bit of an audience, and I'm not sure if it's directly, you know, corresponds to the film industry, but, and I'll give a shout out to an Irish company called Tall Team for you all to check out, an Irish studio. The approach is as follows. You know, they'll release at least a beta of the game, so maybe not the entirety of the game and not necessarily a polished version of the game, and the release is a beta to get those early adopters who may be more passionate about the subject than others, to get their kind of feedback, to kind of get the meta of what is the culture around this game, and is there one? And they try to bring these people together as early as possible, and they do so using a product called Discord, which is a chat tool similar to WhatsApp and so on. And they'll go as far as embedding that chat tool on the page of the game. So I was talking to John, who's the founder of Tall Team, only a couple of days ago, and he's like, we've released a game. It's Smash Karts, which is a very similar, you know, racing game. And he's like, it's incredible what you know, 16-year-old boys speak about, because they're participating in it. There's this Discord group of hundreds, if not thousands, of these kids, and they're learning. They're like, wow, that matters to them. That's interesting. You know, had we intended that, or, oh, you know, they appreciate that little fine detail that we added to it. So I think that really works, where you're building, bringing people together to discuss your product or your piece of art. The other thing that's quite fascinating at the moment is, and I guess I don't know if it's transferable again, is the world of influencers, which is almost a dirty word, but let's say streamers. Streamers in gaming is huge, and there's a new phenomenon whereby they make use of game rooms. So whereby an influencer might have a specific game room where they bring their fans into, and that'll be multiplied. So each streamer will have their own group, and as a game studio, you can learn a lot from watching how those different environments differ from each other, and you get a sense of what works and what doesn't. So I think those two phenomena are quite interesting, and they're doable, I think, for small studios.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was about to use the word exponential growth there, Kieran. Sounds like.
And with the film side.
Go, Wendy, go.
Yeah. Oh, just on the film side, not in the urgent launching tomorrow case during Corona now, but in general, there have been many examples of innovative marketing similar to what you described for gaming, where you release early stage stills, storyboards, excerpts, kicking around concepts with audience, you know, you engage with audiences around the theme long before the film is made, and then get their feedback along the way, whether you use it or not. It's a form of engagement and marketing, and then the film progresses from there. Obviously, that doesn't work when you have 6 days to go online with the Copenhagen Docs Fest, but if you have a few months to go online before your festival or before your launch, there's a lot of non-push materials that can be shared with audiences. And I still find today it's shocking that some of the highest end sales agents in art house in Europe still refuse to release a trailer, for example, on YouTube. There's sometimes a very staunch holding back of assets from the film. And other times I see very innovative approaches, but it certainly now it makes sense to be using digital as best as possible.
Yeah, actually, really important point. And I think this comes only from a digital and development world. And I think to bring it to the film world, and it's logic, and for fear of trying to plug our own product at usheru, but we built a product called Home for Film. Because we've been working with distributors who were building like promotional websites for their films and putting them up and putting them down and putting them up and putting them down. And I know Kieran and Wendy will understand this. There's a rich a diagnostic and data background if you keep everything in one platform. And it's very similar to what you're describing from a gaming point of view, Kieran, there, whereas they're bringing out teasers and they're getting people to engage. And what we're doing with this Home for Film platform is we want everything in the same platform. We want, you know, the minute the trailer comes out, the minute, you know, they've got a second trailer, a third trailer, then they're starting to engage community. You do it all in the one, like, underlying engine, one platform, because then you can see everyone that comes every time, and every piece of marketing that you do, you send to your Home for Film. So everything is layered in on top of each other, and then all that data is in one place. What's very difficult is when you put a trailer on YouTube and then you're trying to then do your marketing on Facebook and sending it to a different destination. You can't match up all these data points and understand who you have interested in your films, what kind of audience you've cultivated. And when you're talking about that, Kieran, it's just so resounding that, you know, that's a good, it's the only approach to take for a long-term view on amassing data and really understanding your audience. And look, it all comes down to that, and everything you're saying there, Kieran, is like, what are these 16-year-olds thinking about? We can't tell them what they should think about what we do. What we have to do is ask them.
I think the long-term approach is always my preferred way of thinking. But I want to just, I guess Wendy here, before we go to some questions as well, so I want to make sure we have time for some questions. Let's just get really short term. Right now, what can people do to get films out there and monetize their catalog? Because there's there's an opportunity now, I guess. Yeah. And you said that VOD platforms are hungry.
Yeah.
I guess two questions. How would you approach publishers? I'm not publishers. I'm getting my gaming things confused now. Platforms. And how would you? And then also then with TVOD, where you can kind of, I guess, or premium VOD. What ways can we sort of maximize that if we want to go down that route?
So in the immediate short term, rights holders are reaching out first, whether it's right or wrong, they're reaching out first to the big 5 types. So maybe there's 10 now, because if they can get a global deal or a domestic deal, they then have something to weigh it against. If they don't get an answer quickly, at the same time, they're reaching out to what I would suggest, I don't know, out of 3,000 VODs in Europe, maybe there's 50 to 100 that actually pay flat fees and are multi-region, credible, not rev share types for SVOD or AdVOD. And finding out if they can get offers quickly for their, on a non-exclusive basis for their library. And if they do, you do your TVOD, not just to iTunes, but to the 40 or 50 other TVOD offerings that are telecom, cable, devices, etc. Then SVOD, then AdVOD. And I would recommend that one flaw that distributors can sometimes do, or sales agents, is to send these massive avail lists of everything they have. And my best practical advice would be pretend you're the buyer and that the platform is not always savvy of your Estonian or Italian or Romanian film. Curate for them, help them find from your library what matches. It's almost matchmaking, like a dating service. What programs in your library fit their profile. Don't send kids programming on the avail list to a horror platform like Shudder and vice versa. And it's amazing how rarely that happens. It's often these big blasts before markets of everything available on my website or in my avail list. I just recommend curating narrowly even a few titles, because once they've looked at those few and decided they want to buy them, it's easier to sell more. So that's kind of the library approach. For the new approach, those are beyond 5 minutes of discussion now, but one would have to weigh the commercial versus PR benefits and supporting the industry in the short term. Some people are making decisions to support the industry, but they're not going to sustain after COVID. And others are trying to come up with a hybrid where, for example, with virtual cinema, where there may always be a hybrid approach, or for festivals, for people who can't attend a festival, they can still attend it virtually, but at a different price point and window, and before it goes on elsewhere. So I think it's almost a big basket question, but I would look at seizing the opportunities now with a curated view of what you have and matching. Take the time to match the platforms in the foreign language countries who are buying more in a way. They're looking for more English stuff to fill more. If they were film services, now they're looking at series. If they were series services, some of them have expanded to other niches. So yeah, it's a whole other topic.
Fascinating. All right, thanks, Wendy.
Yeah.
Shauna, have we got any questions come in that you can feed back?
Hi guys. For people who have any questions, please throw them in the chat there. Earlier, Deepak from India had a comment. I think it could be interesting to hear what you guys think. He said, I sense that there will be a key reset required on how marketing happens in a digital first world. The emphasis will move away from creating a buzz, the current approach, to creating enough advocates and timing the release accordingly. What do you reckon?
It sounds similar to some of the things you were talking about, Kieran.
Very good.
What do you think?
Yeah, that does resonate. I think that's what we see in the gaming space because of the level of risk I think the individual studios and publishers are taking on. So there's a lot about just finding, is there an audience, connecting with that audience, how big is that audience, and how do I get to that audience? And a lot of decisions become about how nimble you can be with respect to what platforms you can work on, how nimble you can be in terms of the business model. And it might be very different in the film industry. In gaming, you see studios starting out with very different goals and ambitions to maybe where they end up with very different ideas of what geographies they're going to be successful in, and even the platforms. So there's a lot of surprises along the way. So I think certainly in the gaming industry, it's a lot more about building that audience and learning as you go versus trying to go for that big splash, which was maybe how things were done initially.
That's so interesting, Kieran. I'm sure there's a lot of people here from the film industry nodding in their home offices.
Okay, that's great. Was there anything else Shauna wishes come in?
I'm keeping my eye out.
Okay. So I think we've got some great just a quick sort of summary, I suppose, of where we are. I mean, there's obviously short-term opportunities in terms of your monetizing your back catalogue, and Wendy's pointed to some techniques, strategies that we can use to fill that demand. Yes, fulfill that demand which is out there for new content or new rights, and then looking towards the future of film marketing, which is what we of course are doing. We talked a lot about building brands. That can't be done on a film by film basis, right? That needs to be done as a distributor, as a publisher, as a producer. That's a longer term strategy, and that's something I think film has sometimes struggled with. The data feedback loop. Kieran talks about getting feedback from the data, but also like qualitative stuff from community, building community. And that influencer piece is part of that. So I think it's some really, really interesting stuff to feed in.
I can see. I'm just putting my hand up for the people who've asked some questions here.
Yeah.
Probably begging to on the Q&A section. Well, I'll shout them out. This is to Wendy. To expand your comms plan point. Oh, it's just jumped. Starting the customer journey with a soft launch and then introduce the harder sell with paid. what are your thoughts on call to actions and destination click-throughs with the thematic approach? I think
I
it's
love
the
that
genre
question.
approach. Yeah.
What do we think about, yes, there's a call to action kind of message. There has to be a call to action, right? There has to be a point where it's all, you've done all that work, you've built that awareness, but then today's the day.
Yeah.
It's, you know, we're open for business. So what, so yeah. And Kieran as well, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I just feel that it's a timing point. If you've engaged real interest with the consumer on the topic and the theme, at a certain point, they will want to and not be offended by a call to action. But it has to be contextualized around, oh, something just, can you hear me?
Yeah, go.
Sorry, I think the computer interfered. At a certain point, it's appropriate to have a call to action and the consumer won't be offended by it. The key is to have them, in a way, pulling for more information rather than pushing. But it's really specific to the type of film and the topic, if it's a documentary or a feature or a niche or genre, we can explore it further.
Okay.
Maybe the other panelists, yeah.
Kieran, do you have anything you wanted to add about just that final call to action piece? Is
yeah, I
what
mean,
can Google do?
Maybe I won't go into what Google can do, and I'll throw it back at what the industry can do. I think the call of action has to be authentic, and there's a wide spectrum from, you know, watch now to join the discussion, right? And if you really want to facilitate the discussion, you have to put resources behind that discussion. So I think it has to be a critical part of the strategy is how deep do you want to get with the audience, and how engaged do you want to be, and where do you want to do it? What are the appropriate platforms? So I think the call of action almost reveals what the strategy is. Is this an environmental documentary where they want to activate viewers into something bigger? Or is it, you know, a horror genre that you want to get a little back, you know, feedback on the, you know, the possible twists and turns the series could have taken, and why? I think Game of Thrones, I'm not ashamed to say that I spent many hours watching fan theory videos on YouTube. And that was kind of part of it, of that particular meta of that show. So I think it's all about how deep into the fandom you want to get with that call to action, or whether you want to just be transactional, watch now, play now, the end.
Yeah. And actually, Kieran, I love your thoughts on this. From an actual execution of marketing campaigns or a strategy, I don't know if you agree, do people need to decide what they're trying to do? Because, you know, there's you can fall into the trap of trying to do everything versus deciding that, okay, that's the route I'm going to go. Have you seen, you know, good and bad of that?
I've seen, I think historically you laid out your goals of what you wanted to achieve, and what's kind of changed is not that your goals changed dramatically, but you maybe have metrics that you use to kind of monitor how things are going. Yeah.
Or so, you learn along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the gaming world, you might be setting out to have a very active participation, you know, 7-day actives or monthly actives, whatever it might be. So you have your core metrics from the beginning that you're going to observe. And that will help you assess whether a platform works for you, or a geography works for you, or an audience works for you. The goal might be financial goal, or it might be to you know, raise awareness of a franchise, or whatever it might be. It can be very different. So I think having metrics from day one is very, very important, even if the goal itself might change.
Interesting.
Okay. I guess that's a great place to leave things. We're at the end of our session. So I'd just firstly like to thank Catherine, Wendy, Shauna and Kieran for sharing their wisdom with us today. We'll be back next week, same time, 12:30, where we will be talking about converting audiences online. Really following up, I think, from Kieran's last point there. So please join us there. The video will also be available of this session to watch and share. So thanks everyone for joining us, and
Thanks,
see you next
Alex.
time.
Thanks all.
Thanks everybody for joining. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good day.